Maya from Snake Hunt is here to talk about how to prevent snake biting dogs.
Hi, Mark the Snake Hunter here, and today I'll be talking about how to protect your dogs from snake bites in the home or backyard. It's very common for dogs to be bitten by snakes, and I'll be speaking with different industry leaders to understand better why a dog's bitten by a snake and what steps can be taken to prevent a snake bite in a dog, and also what to look out for in case your dog is bitten. In this video, I'll be speaking with a vet and vet nurse to talk about what are the signs and symptoms of a snake bite. I'll talk with a pet insurance company about what to look out for in your policies, and be speaking with dog behaviour experts to talk about how to train your dog to stay away from snakes.
This film was inspired by Natalie and her dog Buddy. She went to the movies with her husband and tells the story of what happened the moment she returns home.
I called out for him. He normally would come running straight in. He didn't, and then he eventually came, but he was very stiff, struggling to move, and he just did me out here, and he brought me down the side. There was vomit and diarrhea here. There was all the bushes, the agapanthus in here were all smashed. There were rocks everywhere, and it was like there was a massive fight.
Despite Natalie taking Buddy immediately to the vet clinic within 7 minutes, there was nothing that could be done, and Buddy didn't make it. The effects of the venom were too much for his system.
I'm going to now talk about what to do if your dog comes across a snake in your own backyard. If you see this happen, immediately recall your dog. This is why it's important to have such good recall. You do not want to wait until your dog encounters a snake before you figure out that your dog won't listen. Instead, practice this regularly. Once you've recalled your dog, make sure that you and everybody else is safe. This is not a time to be a hero, this is a time to be safe from snakes. Call the snake hunter immediately, and I'll attend and figure out what's going on. I'll be able to find any snake on the premises and be able to identify the type of snake that's there. If your dog's been bitten, or if you suspect a snake bite in a dog, immediately take it to the vet so that way they can get the proper treatment.
So if there's been a suspected snake bite in any of your pets, make sure that you get them to your closest veterinary clinic as soon as possible. The main thing is time is of the essence of any snake bite.
So when we have a dog present with suspect snake bite, we do a full clinical exam. So we initially have a look at the animal, see if it's moving around, if it's ambulatory. Then we have a close look at its eyes to see whether it's got dilated pupils and also an incomplete blink. Then we have a look at its mouth to see whether it's drooling, whether it's salivating a lot. And then we have a look at its muscles to see whether it's trembling and whether it's able to walk around or not. Later on, we start to see progressive signs like blood in the urine and also respiratory arrest. So once we've looked over a dog and then confirmed that it's likely been bitten by a snake, then the first thing we do is put it on a drip. We would always treat with a polyvalent antivenin, and so that's an antivenom which has antibodies in it which counter a wide range of snake venom. And so what we'll generally do is keep a dog in the hospital, keep a dog on a drip, start him on antibiotics in case there's aspiration pneumonia or other bacterial infections, and keep a close eye on things because there can be often quite a prolonged recovery and also complications following a snake bite.
The amazing work performed by our vets is truly worth it but can cost thousands. I've consoled many dog owners who have had their dog either bitten or tragically killed by a snake. Many explain that depending on the type of insurer, it can either be a very simple process or long, drawn out and costly. To find out more about what's the right pet insurance to choose and what to look out for in your policy, I spoke with Doug Ford of Petplan Pet Insurance Australia. So I'm here with Doug Ford from Petplan to talk about pet insurance in dogs. So good morning, Doug. How are you going?
Morning. Excellent, thank you.
And can you tell us a bit about what pet insurance is?
Yep, pet insurance is insurance against the unforeseen and unexpected in regard to the animal's health.
Sure.
So an accident or an illness, that's what we're here to cover.
Now, if a snake were to bite a dog,
Yep,
would Petplan cover something like that?
most definitely.
Yes.
That's unforeseen, unexpected, and yes, it definitely, Pet Plan covers it, and it covers the entire treatment of that for that snake to the maximum benefit of the policy.
Can you explain what a supplement is?
Yes, what happens is some insurers will say, okay, this is likely to occur, we know it's very expensive, so what we will do is only cover this up to a certain amount, say
Sure.
$500.
Sure.
Where Pet Plan, we don't put those supplements on our policy.
Sure.
We cover it for the full extent of the, the maximum benefit of the policy.
Sure.
Because it is not common for dogs and snakes to get along as well as these two, I strongly encourage all dog owners to consider pet insurance to protect against the high costs associated with snake bites. As Doug advised, make sure your insurance policy covers snake bites and that there are no sublimits. Also, be sure to read your product disclosure statement carefully.
After watching the devastating impact that a snake bite can have in a dog and how it affects the owners, I wanted to find out what could be done to protect dogs from snake bites. This led me on a very interesting journey. I spoke with almost every dog trainer in Victoria, of which many could not properly explain how dogs avoid snakes, why dogs are interested in snakes, and what could be done about it. Those who said they had the answer would not be willing to go on camera to do so, and could not even verify their claims. Like with snake catching, I found actions speak louder than words. So in the same way I can hold a venomous tiger snake the entire time that I'm talking to you, I wanted to find somebody who would be able to explain what to do to keep dogs safe from snakes. This led me on a very interesting journey whereby I met Australia's leading dog trainer who is based here in Melbourne.
To find out and understand the best way to train dogs to stay away from snakes, I spoke with Von Farrell, global leaders in working canine genetics, and who have been recommended by law enforcement and other experts in the field of dog training.
Yes.
Down. Leeway. Yes.
You're dealing with multiple issues here. One of the issues is that anything that's unusual, a dog will investigate because it's novel and they have an interest in anything that moves. And so naturally they want to engage in something that moves. The problem we have is we need to teach the animal that particular things are dangerous. Dogs learn that naturally in their environment because they either get bitten or get hurt or have some sort of aversive experience. But if we understand learning quadrants or learning paradigms, how an animal learns, and we learn through 4 modes of learning, and this is humans including positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, negative punishment, which is not actually a punisher as such, what people think, and a positive punishment, which is what people think, which is inflicting a bit of stress to an animal. The reality is that a behaviour cannot be encouraged or created without a positive and negative experience, right? So unless there's an aversive outcome or aversive stimuli, there are no behaviours that can be created. The reality is that the dog needs some sort of aversive stimuli to teach it that don't go there. The problem we have with modern day training is that we don't teach our animals how to deal with aversives. And let's face it, Every single dog is born with an inability to deal with an aversive. We need to teach them how to deal with it and what it actually means and make it mean something positive. Strangely, science shows us that we can turn a punisher into a positive reinforcer. Weird, but it can happen. And we do it every day with all our training systems. Not that you teach dogs through punishment, but we teach them that it means something. Not just an avoidance response to snakes, but it actually turns out to be quite an interesting response because the dog learns that he gets something from it. When a dog sees a snake or a dog sees any stimuli, they're usually a visual stimulus. And so dogs rely on movement and visual stimuli first before anything else to attach a meaning to it. We want the dog to attach a particular meaning to a visual object, like a snake. The problem we have is that if we interfere with their training or interfere with their visual component of seeing an animal by approaching the dog at the same time as an animal, like a snake, the dog starts to interpret that it can only do or not do certain things when the snake's visible or in its presence. The problem is you may be able to control the animal with whatever system that you have. What are you going to do when a snake suddenly appears in your backyard and there is no one around? You're at work and the dog's by itself. So we need to teach the dog a particular type of response when it sees the signal of a snake as an olfactory signal or a visual signal so that we get the best possible outcome. After a careful investigation of all the methods that are available, I am quite partial to probably the best method, which is in WA with a guy called Seth Pywell. The question with all these systems are whether they are reliable. I find this to be the most reliable system by far. You know, most people believe that an animal is reliable because they're present and they can control the outcome and in that context, but the reliability must come from you not being present. Is the dog going to respond the way you want it to respond, whether you're there or not? And fundamentally, they don't, if you don't train correctly. The problem with the snake is that if a dog stumbles on the snake, he can't help but be inquisitive, and you have to be able to call him from all possible distractors or attractions. And these snakes are an attraction, let's face it, not a distraction. And so the biggest problem is reliability in your recall. That stems from your training. If you don't have the right training system, then your dog won't be reliable. And reliability comes positive and negative reinforcers so that the dog understands it has to and it wants to.
After speaking with Chris from Von Forel, I got on a plane to speak with Seth Pywell to better understand how to properly teach dogs to stay away from snakes.
Yeah, my name's Seth Pywell. I've got 16 years experience with dog training, and one of the many services I provide is snake avoidance training. Today people are looking more and more towards softer and softer forms of training for the animal's welfare, and that's a good thing, and so we should. However, there is a limit to the amount of reward-only training we can do. At the end of the day, there must be consequences for doing and engaging in the wrong or unacceptable or dangerous behaviour. And so the way to make it reliable is the first thing is we need to teach the dog what we do want it to do, which is get away from that reptile, create distance, show avoidance in the reptile. And we can create that behaviour and we can reward that behaviour. That won't necessarily make it reliable because I can do this and I may get paid with food treats. I can extinguish slightly unpleasant feelings, but at the end of the day, that slightly unpleasant feeling is not enough to dissuade me from the promise of prey stimulus. So when the snake moves, it talks to the instincts of the dog and says, this promises a heap of fun. This should be enjoyable. We can play with this. This is a giant chew toy. And the instinct of the dog wants to engage in play. The cognitive learning says, I think we should step away. And ultimately it's up to the dog to decide. And the only thing that's going to prevent that dog from deciding on the day, I think we might just go and see if this is a pleasurable chew toy, is the fear of making its own physical situation worse. So the dog says, it's too risky, it's too uncomfortable, I'm not going to take the gamble today. So I know the correct behaviour is stepping away, and I also know that the incorrect behaviour through learning is so unpleasant that I'm not prepared to gamble with that. And that's where your reliability comes in. When you can't convince the dog, go on, buddy, go play with the snake, promise you, it'll be fun. And the dog says, you're on your own because I think it's a really bad idea and you give me really bad advice. That's where the reliability comes in. It's for the dog protecting its own physical comfort. That's reliability. Learning on an intellectual level. So we're giving the dog the answer and it's practicing the correct answer, repeating it with different reptiles in different locations so that when it comes time to inject emotion into the equation, the dog can channel that emotion into a correct response and amplify the correct response, and it's not going to make the dog feel it has to defend itself and create a reptile killer because it experienced something unpleasant and it wants to defend itself and extinguish the unpleasant feeling by extinguishing the snake. Instead, we're going to teach the avoidance behavior cognitively, and then when we inject emotion, the dog's going to fly into this avoidance behavior. Rubber snakes and snake skins will teach the dog to perfectly and beautifully avoid rubber snakes and snake skins. But rubber snakes and snake skins are not the problem. And the dog will not generalize from a rubber snake onto a real snake or a snake skin onto a real snake. So by using these ineffective aids, you're just fooling yourself, but you're not fooling your dog. When you're dealing with aggression is always comes from a position of concern for the dog's own welfare. So the aggression comes when the dog has an emotional response, typically from the training collar. It'll feel something unpleasant, and if this is used on a higher level and the dog starts to feel concern for his own welfare, the dog can try and extinguish this by showing aggression towards the snake. The dog believes that this stimulation came from the snake, and hence some dogs will show avoidance, whereas an aggressive dog will show aggression towards the snake in an attempt to protect himself and extinguish this unpleasant feeling. And that's why it's important to teach the dog the correct behavior cognitively and give him the right answer. So you're using low-level stimulation, you're teaching the dog the correct answer, you're removing the unpleasant feeling, which is stimulated by the snake. He steps away from the unpleasant feeling, he gets rewarded with food treats, and when the dog understands that, and he's learned this with multiple reptiles in multiple locations, and the dog now understands clearly the correct response, then we can start to elevate the levels to create an emotional connection to the training. So the first lot of training is to teach the dog the answer cognitively. Okay, so Mark's asked what it feels like to use an e-collar and a little bit about e-collars, and I think the best way of explaining what an e-collar feels like is to put it on Mark. A lot of people wonder, are they cruel? Does it hurt? Can you physically burn holes in the dog? And now a lot of this has been disproven, but still there seems to be people out there who like to spread misinformation. Okay, so the dogs we train today, I'm going to give you the exact same sensation that the dogs today went through because we record the levels of stimulation that they're corrected at. So the first dog, it was educated on stimulation level 6. So I'll dial this up to 6, and that's it there. It's imperceivable to you. The dog could feel it, and so this is what we work with. We don't work with a level that we feel is appropriate for us. We work with the level that's appropriate to the dog. So that there, which you cannot feel, is the level that the first dog was trained on. Sure. And we use the least amount of stimulation required to teach the behaviour. And then the next dog was level 22. So this is a fair bit higher than 5. So we go to 22.
I can feel tingling, and it caused my hand to move. Yep. But it didn't hurt. If you do it again, yeah. So involuntary reflex on my fingers. That's it.
This is because this technology is the exact same technology as a TENS machine that you might use on an injured knee or shoulder injury. So this is TENS machine technology, and that's level 22, which it took for this dog to learn.
Sure.
And then the next dog was actually quite a lot higher, and this is not typical. Typically dogs learn from levels between 15 to 20. A few of these were a bit less than usual. This is a bit higher than usual, and that was all the way up to 38 for this individual. So I can see you breathing deeply here. Okay, so here's 38.
It doesn't actually hurt. It's
No,
a strange sensation, but it doesn't hurt.
It's a strange sensation, it doesn't hurt, and this has the effect of startling the dog. We don't want to cause any physical pain. I don't know if you'd call this painful,
No.
but it is unpleasant.
Yeah.
So that's 38. That's the highest level that any of the dogs experience today.
Okay, fantastic.
So where this is on the actual body, where this makes contact, actually affects you differently. And you'll find that it gives you different sensations depending on whereabouts it is.
Sure.
So this is why we can't just assume that one level suits all.
Sure.
And the placement of the collar will change. So if that collar shifts during training, the dog will experience a different stimulation, which is why we must always calibrate it properly for the individual dog.
That deals with a lot of the myths that people have about e-collars. Many people think that they're going to shock the dog or it's going to hurt the dog. It's an unpleasant sensation, but it's not something that's actually painful by any stretch of the imagination.
No, I wouldn't refer to it as painful, definitely unpleasant.
Yeah.
It goes everything from the I can feel you, you don't bother me, to this is slightly unpleasant, to this, I don't like this. And I look at it similar to stretching. If you stretch, you can hit at a certain point that it feels good.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to keep going, it starts to feel unpleasant.
Yeah.
And this is typical of the remote collar.
Perfect.
We want to create the avoidance of the reptile, but we want to do it the reptile alone, and not contextually. Not people with snake hooks, not handlers or collars or leash pressure. There's many things that must be avoided. Yeah, the issue with your Me Too operators, the people who feel genuinely about this training but have no experience or no knowledge, what they can do with their dogs may appear to work to them because they're a novice. And so what occurs when the dog presented with a snake and they receive a correction and the dog tries to escape, they look at that and think, wow, this is hugely successful. The dog understands, the dog is getting this. And the trouble is that when there's contextual issues, or if it's not taught properly, the dog can be concerned about the handler, can be concerned about the snake handler, the dog trainer, can be concerned about the remote collar, and there's many things that come into play. Yeah, this is a very common misconception. And when you look at training a dog for snakes, venomous snakes do not look or smell any different to any other snake. Essentially, when a dog smells, it's picking up odor from skin rafts. And when the dog smells an odor, it can smell and it can identify three things. One is the species, one is the individual, and the other is whether it might be male or female, if it's in estrus or so on. So when you're talking about if a dog can smell a venomous snake as opposed to a non-venomous snake, to the dog, all snake odor is generically snake odor, and unless you're going to teach a dog to specifically target an individual snake, it basically belongs to the snake realm and the snake odor.
Thank you for watching today. In summary, make sure you train your dog to have very good recall in case it comes across a snake in the backyard and you're there. If you suspect a snake bite in the dog, immediately take it to the vet so you can get proper diagnosis and treatment. I strongly recommend to get pet insurance. The cost of treating a snake bite in a dog is very expensive, and of all the pet insurance companies that I researched, I strongly recommend Pet Plan Pet Insurance Australia. It's very important that you teach your dog to stay away from snakes. This can be done through appropriate dog behaviour experts, and this is something that I now offer. I've done a lot of advanced training with Seth Pywell from Perth Dog Trainers, and I now can offer this to Melbourne residents and their pet dogs. If you're interested to find out about how to teach your dog to stay away from snakes, give me a call or send me an email and I'd be happy to speak with you. I would like to give a special thank you to everyone who helped me make this video. Through their expert advice, we better understand how to keep our beloved dogs safe from snakes. Remember, if you see a snake, keep calm and call the snake hunter.